There comes a moment in your life when you look at yourself in the mirror and realize you've been carrying a weight you never agreed to hold. A heaviness that doesn't feel like it belongs to you. A story that didn't begin with your choices, yet somehow became your job to finish. And even if you've never said it out loud, a part of you knows the truth. The person you are today, or the person you're afraid of becoming, is connected in a deep and quiet way to the man who raised you, or the man who didn't. This isn't about blame. This isn't about attacking a parent who may have never learned anything better. It's about something softer, something that whispers to you during the quiet nights when all distractions fade. In those moments, you're left with the questions you've avoided for years. Why do I feel so fragile? Why do simple things drain me? Why do I fight invisible battles that no one else notices? And if you follow those questions back to their source, you often end up at the same place, your father. Because a father doesn't only raise a child. He raises the child's inner voice, the voice you hear when you doubt yourself, the voice you hear when you try to impress others, the voice that speaks when you fail, the voice that whispers when you're scared to take your next step. For some people, that voice is warm. For others, it's sharp. For many, it's missing altogether. But maybe for you, it became a voice that makes you shrink instead of grow. A voice that slows you down instead of pushing you forward. A voice repeating patterns you inherited without knowing it. Maybe you've asked yourself, why do I freeze under pressure? Why do I avoid things that could help me? Why do I get scared of situations other people find easy? You think it's weakness, but it's not weakness. It's training. You were shaped to breathe in a world built from someone else's fears. A child learns strength through the behavior of their parents. Children learn if the world is kind or dangerous from how their parents respond to pain. They learn if emotions are safe or shameful based on how their parents react to feelings. If your father raised you with silence, you learn to quiet yourself. If he used anger, you learn to walk carefully. If he set impossible standards, you learned that you are never enough. If he was absent, you questioned your worth. If he was unpredictable, you became a thinker of worst-case scenarios. If he hid his emotions, you learned to hide yours too. If he never apologized, you learned that admitting fault was unsafe. If he demanded perfection, you developed anxiety disguised as ambition. If he avoided discomfort, you grew into someone who avoids anything that might hurt. If he lived small, you learned to shrink yourself. None of these things make him a monster. They make him human, but they also left you carrying burdens you weren't built for. And maybe that's why you feel weak today. Not because you're weak, but because you grew up surviving instead of living. You spent your childhood reading his moods instead of understanding your own. You learned how not to upset him instead of learning how to express yourself. Survival mode rewires the brain. This isn't poetry. This is actual science. Growing up with unpredictability or emotional distance changes the stress systems. The confidence circuits, the way you make decisions. You might feel stuck today, not because you're incapable, but because your nervous system was trained to expect danger instead of opportunity. Think of how much of your identity was formed by trying to solve emotional puzzles that never belonged to you. How you learned to hide your true self because being seen felt unsafe. That wasn't weakness. That was adaptation. Your mind protected you in the only way it knew how. But here's the painful truth. What kept you safe as a child is the very thing that limits you as an adult. You learned freezing as protection, and now you call it indecision. You learned self-doubt early, and now you call it humility. You learned avoidance, and now you call it peace. You learned independence through fear, and now you call it strength. You learned to expect little from people, and now you call it realism. You learned to stay small, and now you call it your personality. What if none of these were choices? What if they were automatic, inherited programs? Because here's something most people never admit. Your relationship with your father became the blueprint for your relationship with yourself. If he didn't support your dreams, you learned to distrust your own. If he rarely expressed pride, you learned to seek validation instead of fulfillment. If he feared emotions, you learned to bury yours. If he carried old fears, you absorbed the emotional echoes. Maybe what you call weakness is actually inherited protection. But here's the most hopeful part. You don't have to finish the story you were handed. People underestimate how deeply a father's energy shapes a child. Not through lectures, through presence, through tone, through silence, through how he carries his own pain, through the parts of himself he never healed. A father teaches you what strength looks like. A father teaches you what to fear. A father teaches you how to treat yourself. If he struggled internally, he might have handed those struggles to you without meaning to, not through intention, but through example. And so you grew up believing emotional restraint is strength, silence equals maturity, never asking for help equals independence, overworking equals responsibility, exhaustion equals normal, love means self-sacrifice, worth must be earned, not felt. But look at how those beliefs have broken you. Look how drained you feel, how disconnected you are from yourself, how you fight invisible wars no one knows about, how unsure you feel with every choice, how praise makes you uncomfortable, how guilt appears when you rest, how hard it is to speak honestly, how numb you feel around joy. This isn't weakness. This is emotional conditioning. People don't talk about this because it hurts to admit that the person who shaped you most also created battles for you to fight alone as an adult. Healing begins with honesty. And honesty begins here. You didn't become this way alone. Your habits, fears, defenses, they were taught quietly by the environment you grew up in. People say, just be confident. But they don't understand that you were raised in a world where confidence felt dangerous. Being loud, bold, honest, emotional, independent, all those things felt risky. But here's the part you weren't told. You can outgrow the blueprint you were given. Just because you inherited patterns doesn't mean you're stuck with them forever. Just because you were shaped by someone else's limits doesn't mean you can't rise beyond them. And the moment you start questioning these patterns, the moment you say, wait, maybe this isn't truly me, that is the beginning of strength. That awareness is evolution. But to rebuild yourself, you have to face something painful. You must see your father as a person, not a perfect figure, a person with fears, a person shaped by his childhood, a person who never received emotional tools, a person who survived instead of grew, a person who loved you in the only way he knew, even if that way wounded you. A person who carried wounds he never named. Understanding this doesn't excuse anything, but it explains everything. Once you see the origin of your patterns, you stop seeing yourself as broken. You start seeing yourself as aware. And awareness is the first kind of freedom. Once awareness arrives, everything shifts. Your strength starts to grow quietly. Not the kind he taught, but the kind you are building. A strength rooted in honesty, in self-respect, in understanding your vulnerability instead of hiding it. And something else happens. Your heart softens. Not in weakness, but in truth. You realize your father wasn't the full version of himself when he raised you. He was the version shaped by his fears, his upbringing, and the parts of him he never healed. Maybe he never learned how to express care. Maybe he never learned apology. Maybe he mistook seriousness for strength. Maybe he confused control with safety. Maybe he copied what he was taught. And these pieces of him became pieces of you. But once you see this, you gain the power to challenge everything you inherited. You start noticing moments where you act out of habit, not truth. where you repeat emotional reflexes that aren't yours anymore, where your inner critic sounds more like him than like you. This is the beginning of real adulthood, separating your identity from your upbringing. You start asking, does this rule still serve me? Because inherited rules may have protected you once, but now they imprison you. Rules like, stay quiet, don't express too much, handle everything alone, don't disappoint anyone, don't ask for help, never show weakness. These rules taught you how to endure, but not how to live. They taught you how to function, but not how to feel. They taught you survival, not self-discovery. And questioning these rules will feel like betrayal, not because you're doing something wrong, but because your mind learned to associate these rules with safety. But you're not a child anymore. The dangers you prepared for don't exist anymore, yet you still react as if they do. That's why you avoid hard conversations. That's why expressing emotion scares you. That's why you feel responsible for everyone's feelings. That's why you overthink everything. That's why you shrink when you need to rise. That's why validation feels like a reward. That's why you exhaust yourself, trying to be the version of you that keeps everyone else comfortable. These behaviors are not flaws. They are inherited self-protection strategies. But eventually, you reach a moment, soft, quiet, almost painful, when you realize the life you're living isn't truly yours. It's the life you learn to maintain, keeping alive. Keeping alive something that never belonged to you is exhausting. So let me ask you gently, who would you be if you weren't trying to meet the standards of the father you grew up with? Not the ideal father, the real one. Who would you be without the fear of his disappointment? Without carrying his emotional shadows? Without living inside the echo of his silence? Maybe this is the moment you realize something powerful. Your weakness is not lack of strength. Your weakness is lack of permission. Permission you've been waiting for your whole life. But permission doesn't come from him. It comes from you. You can outgrow the world that taught you to shrink. You can evolve beyond what you inherited. You can become someone your father never had the chance to be. And that is not betrayal. That is expansion. That is healing. That is continuation, not rejection. Perhaps deep inside, even he wished for you to grow in ways he couldn't. And real transformation isn't loud. It doesn't happen in one big moment. It begins with small choices repeated quietly. The moment you pause before shrinking. The moment you speak honestly instead of staying silent. The moment you rest without guilt. The moment you ask for help without shame. The moment you say, this is how I feel. The moment you stop apologizing for existing. The moment you choose discomfort instead of avoidance. The moment you forgive yourself for learned behavior. These small shifts build a new voice inside you, your voice. Not the inherited one, not the frightened one, not the obedient one, the real one. The you who has been waiting beneath the surface. The you who craves honesty. The you who wants connection. The you who wants purpose, not survival. The you who wants to live boldly without apologizing. Maybe that version of you feels distant. Maybe you're unsure where to begin. But every transformation begins with one truth. You are not responsible for your father's emotional wounds. You are responsible only for what you carry forward. Your father's strengths shaped you, but so did his fears, his silence, his insecurities, his unhealed parts. But now you have something he didn't. Awareness. Awareness is the first doorway. Walk through it, and you begin to see, facing your past doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger than the generation before you. Because real strength isn't emotionlessness. Real strength is understanding the roots of your own patterns. Real strength is seeing your father clearly, the good and the bad, without letting either decide who you become. And one day, when you look back, you will see something extraordinary. The thing you once called weakness was actually the starting point of your transformation. It wasn't failure. It was awakening. It was your mind asking for more healing, more clarity, more truth, more freedom. Freedom from emotional echoes. Freedom from inherited rules. Freedom from the belief that you must carry what your father could not. Because now, your story continues with you, not with your father's limitations, not with the weight you were handed, but with the strength you are building inside yourself, quietly, slowly, bravely. And maybe the most beautiful truth of all is this: you were never weak because of your father. You only believed you were. Your weakness was simply the signal that you were ready to become something more. And that strength, your strength, is only just beginning to rise. That you've begun to see your father as human, not perfect. Something quietly shifts inside you. A space opens where there used to only be rules, fear, and hesitation. It's a small space at first, almost invisible, but it's enough. Enough to take the tiniest step toward the life you actually want. Because here's the truth. No one tells you. Growth isn't dramatic. It doesn't start with fireworks or a grand gesture. It starts quietly, slowly, moment by moment. The person you want to become isn't born from one decision. It's built in the pauses, the choices, the little acts you repeat when no one is watching. The moment you stop shrinking in situations that once terrified you, that's growth. The moment you speak honestly about something small you would normally hide, that's strength. The moment you rest without guilt, without pretending, without thinking you're lazy, that's freedom. The moment you set a boundary, even a tiny one, that's self-respect. The moment you forgive yourself for things you didn't choose but learned, that's maturity. These moments add up quietly. They stack layer by layer, like bricks in a wall you are building inside yourself. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, a new voice begins to replace the old one. A voice that doesn't shout, "You're not enough," or "You must survive at all costs." A voice that says, "I can try. I can fail and still be okay. I can speak my truth. I can feel without fear. I can grow at my own pace." This voice is not arrogance. It is courage. Not rebellion. It is awareness. Not denial. It is freedom. And here's where life offers you a choice. A real choice this time. Continue repeating inherited patterns, or step into a new way of being. The first path feels safe because it is familiar. It's predictable. You know every fear, every rule, every reflex. You know how to survive in it. It's exhausting, but it's safe. The second path feels strange at first. It's uncomfortable. It asks you to question everything you were taught, to see the ways you've been bending, hiding, and shrinking, to admit that maybe some of your habits, your strengths, your carefully constructed armor were actually survival tools, not real growth. And yes, this path asks courage. Courage to face your emotions. Courage to stop apologizing for them. Courage to let go of invisible burdens you weren't meant to carry. Courage to stop living life to meet expectations you never agreed to. But here's the good news. Courage grows in action, not thought. It grows when you take small steps. And you've already begun. The awareness you've gained, the realization that some of your weaknesses were inherited patterns. Not your fault. That is your first act of courage. From here, you can start making choices that honor your true self. Choice 1. Speak without rehearsal. Say what you mean, even if it feels awkward. Feel the discomfort and notice it isn't dangerous. Choice 2. Ask for help. Allow support without shame. Discover that needing someone doesn't mean weakness. Choice 3. Rest without guilt. Understand that your body, mind, and soul were never meant to run on borrowed strength alone. Choice 4. Set boundaries. Quietly, calmly, firmly. Protect your energy without explaining endlessly. Choice 5. Own your mistakes. Accept imperfection. See it as learning, not failure. Choice 6. Feel without hiding. Allow yourself the full range of emotions. Grief, joy, anger, love. They all belong to you. Choice 7. Let go of inherited rules. Question every must and should. Keep what serves you. Release what does not. Each of these choices seems small on its own, but taken together, they slowly reconstruct the inner voice that once shrank in fear. That old voice becomes softer, less controlling, less echoing the limitations of someone else. You start to notice patterns in yourself that aren't really yours. Old triggers, old doubts, old fears. And when you do, you gently interrupt them. Not with anger or judgment, but with awareness. Double quotes. Wait, this isn't mine. This is learned. I can respond differently. And that's where real freedom begins. The freedom to rewrite your life from the inside out. You are not rebuilding to erase your past. You are rebuilding to reclaim yourself. To grow beyond what you inherited. To live without invisible chains. And slowly, as you continue these small acts, something remarkable happens. The strength you thought you lacked begins to appear. The confidence you thought you would never feel starts to grow. The courage to speak, to act, to rest, to love, to build, it surfaces quietly, steadily, because real strength is not loud. It is not brutal. It is subtle. It is steady. It is patience. It is the ability to continue, even when fear lingers. It is the ability to keep choosing yourself every day, even when the world hasn't made it easy. And eventually, one day, you realize you are not the man you were forced to be. You are not the man your father made you out to be. You are the man you chose to become. And that, finally, is freedom.